Anyway, yeah, I went to watch a couple of detransition videos. So these are just things that appear in my timeline, in my feed now and then. So we've got this right here, which is my detransition story, female to male, back to female, wrestled at animation. Let's have a look.
Chapter 1, Early Childhood. Growing up, I was a nerdy tomboy while my sister was quite girly, and then having my mom push me to be more girly like her is where I initially developed my jealousy of boys. One thing I especially hated was being forced to have long hair because my mom would try to put into French braids and she would brush it really painfully, and she also put in like this noxious sticky hairspray. One day she actually tried to cut my hair and she screwed up so badly that it had to be fixed by a professional by cutting into a pixie cut, which I loved, but she did not, so I wasn't able to get my hair.
You don't like their voice? I mean, bear in mind, they'll have been on tea and stuff potentially, and now they're coming off of that, you know what I mean?
Hair cut into a pixie cut until years later. But yeah, on to like 5th grade is when I first really started wanting to dress in boys' clothing, but my mom wasn't really about letting me shop in the boys section, so
I'll say one thing, like, you'll end up like potentially rebelling if a certain thing feels forced on you. That's definitely a thing that can push people a certain way. We have to remember that.
Would take clothes for my brother. This is also the year I really got into anime and cosplay, and especially having a desire to cosplay as the boy characters. But my mom still wouldn't let me until one year where she relented and let me wear Ash Ketchum costume from Pokemon, though she would have rather me dressed as Pikachu. And then the next year, which is 6th grade, is when I realized I like
autistic sensory stuff. Yeah, autism is a common thing. Can make you feel very alien, not only to other people, but to yourself, to your gender. Things like gender roles might seem extremely nonsensical to you, because a lot of things that so-called normal people do can seem like nonsensical and irritating if you're autistic. Can't these people see the similarities with their stories? Well, I don't know, maybe. I mean, this person's coming out as detrans, so that might be part of the point.
Liked women, which I initially came out as bisexual, then later I started identifying as a butch lesbian, and then after testosterone use, I actually identify as bisexual now.
Yeah, so there we go, testosterone use.
Chapter 2, Finding the Trans Community. Since I've always been into anime and gaming, it's not surprising I found Tumblr and joined fandoms, which is how I got introduced to the whole
Hey, can you see me? Charlie got me flowers. Look, how nice are they? Oh. I do apologize. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Someone found the trans community, which is often a massive yikes.
Trans thing in 2016. I'd see other lesbians transitioning, trans headcanons in fandoms I was in, as well as posts on Tumblr and videos from trans YouTubers about how they knew they were trans, which I related to. My masculine clothes, attraction to women.
Yeah, so we're fairly open about the social contagion aspect, I would say, in this case. People having things in common, and you want to keep having things in common with them, so you follow them off whatever cliff they go off, potentially.
Hobbies, no desire to ever have kids, hating my body, and hating the idea of men finding me attractive were all used as signs that I was trans, not to mention the inverse I'd see from male to female people, wanting to be women because they wanted to be sexy or gain this male attention, liking having long hair, liking...
People in chat don't seem to be liking this person. They seem very honest about what's actually going on here. This seems like one of the most honest things I've ever seen in my life. Like, Jesus Christ.
That I was trans, not to mention the inverse I'd see from male to female. No desire to ever have kids, hating my...
Like, I'm only into women. Things about, like, hair and, like, bras and makeup and stuff. Like, to me, this seems like the most honest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, this is literally what we're seeing all the time, and they're just spelling it out.
My body and hating the idea of men finding me attractive were all used as signs that I was trans.
Like never wanting kids and stuff. How many of these kids on Tumblr are like still kids themselves? And that's what you're saying. Crazy.
Not to mention the inverse I'd see from male to female people, wanting to be women because they wanted to be sexy or gain this male attention, liking having long hair, liking makeup, wearing women's clothing.
See, some of that is true of me, but then I'm honest, I guess. I just say that I'm gender non-conforming these days.
And all matter of reductive stereotypes that I didn't fit into cemented these feelings that I should have been born male. The trans community was telling me that I was born in the wrong body, which is a phrase I've really come to hate. I think it's harmful to tell somebody that hates their body that their body is wrong and that they'll commit suicide if they don't.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is, like, super honest in my opinion. This is what we hear over and over and over again. Like, I believe every word at the moment. And hey, listen, anyone might be making up shit, you know what I mean? But this just seems like, I think this person's being incredibly honest about their experience. Hi, tooling around, I hope you're good.
Don't transition, especially if this person is a minor. Not to mention, they never scanned to see if my brain was like an opposite sex brain before starting HRT because it's just a theory. I started identifying as trans at 14, but I was
at 14, and they're hearing this stuff that makes them decide they're trans, stuff like, I don't want kids. So they start taking like testosterone, probably going to be unable to have kids by the time they're in adulthood. It's insane.
Striving to become stealth in the future because I didn't want to be trans.
Not wanting kids as a teenager is a normal thing at that development stage. Yeah, it probably is, yeah. But we teach people to pathologize that kind of shit, don't we? Same thing as middle-aged women claiming they're asexual. I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough middle-aged women to know.
I wish to be biologically male and...
No, what they're saying is... Let me get it again, because I don't think they're saying that it's the brains that do that. It's that you were born in the wrong body, suggesting that you have a different brain for what your body should be. You know what I mean? Or the other way around.
I think it's harmful to tell somebody that hates their body that their body is wrong and that they'll commit suicide if they don't transition, especially if this person is a minor. Not to mention, they never scanned to see if my brain was like an opposite sex.
Yeah, because if you're going to say that you can be born in the wrong body, then wouldn't that suggest that it's something that a brain scan would pick up? I think that's more what they're saying, personally.
Be trans. I wish to be biologically male and believe that transitioning would be the brain before starting HRT, but I was striving to become stealth in the future because I didn't want to be trans. I wish to be biologically male and believe that transitioning would be the next closest thing to treat my dysphoria. I ended up desisting for a bit in 2018 due to my family being unsupportive and fear that transitioning would end up ruining my life down the line, particularly when it came to job security and my physical health. I honestly wish I had just stopped there and continued to express myself the way I liked, regardless of my gender.
Yeah, just be a butch lesbian. There's nothing wrong with that. You can look like masculine. That's the whole point. If you're like gender critical and you're sensible in any way, shape, or form, what you should be saying is that there's two sexes, but there's a myriad ways of being either sex. In terms of like your appearance, in terms of like gendered shit, you know what I mean? If they keep claiming there are brain differences, why aren't they scanning brains a match, of course? Because there's no real evidence for it. There's absolutely not enough evidence for that shit. And I think the cost probably does factor into it as well, you know what I mean? It's expensive. There's no real evidence for it. I think it all kind of meshes together.
But instead I tried to be more feminine to make my mom happy, because of how rejected I felt by her as a masculine woman. So I began dressing in women's clothing, growing out my hair and trying makeup, which I hated doing, and that just made me end up wishing I were born male even more. I wish I would have gotten the help I needed at this point and addressed the root cause of my dysphoria, which would have allowed me to accept
wanting to be invisible to man, stereotypes, sexism, fear of being victimized, self-hatred, homophobia. Yeah.
myself as a masculine.
I mean, stuff like fear of being victimized, wanting to be invisible to men. Who was it we were watching? It was Caitlin Bennett interviewing some young trans boy. He was like spelling out half this like verbatim. How can they get evidence if they don't scan brains? Well, I mean, they scan brains for all different kinds of things, you know what I mean? So there's brain scans and stuff. There's brain scans and stuff for all kinds of other things. They can use that data for other things. And I think they would have found a lot more evidence for brains being like dimorphic, and thus you can potentially tell if someone's got the wrong kind of brain, if that was the case. And then the other thing is, there are studies where they have scanned people's brains, and often they just don't really find a huge amount of evidence. And yeah, like, I think what they're saying is, I don't like things like, I was born in the wrong body, and it's not like I got my brain scanned or anything. Like, the inference of I was born in the wrong body suggests that you've got the wrong brain for your body, or you've got the wrong body for your brain. You know what I mean? So I think that was this person's point way more.
Masculine woman, but I bought into the narrative of
internalized homophobia and sexism. Why you're trans? You just have internalized transphobia. 41%. Jesus. Alternative treatment is transphobic. Transitioning will clear your dysphoria. It does not always. That evidence is there are similarities if you add estrogen to both brains, but that's evidence of plasticity. Yeah. So yeah, there's not the evidence to do it. And this person isn't saying my brain should have been scanned and that would have showed me. I mean, it might have done if their mindset was like that at the time, but I think that's far more what they're implying.
Dysphoria being permanent and only treatable through gender-affirming surgeries and hormones.
Okay, the point she was saying, if it was true they could have done brain scan, but really it's bullshit. Yeah, I agree with you, Gypsy Lee. I agree.
So I persisted in chasing this goal. Chapter 3, Hormones. I started testosterone when I was 18 through informed consent. I had a telehealth appointment. I started testosterone when I was 18 through informed consent.
Informed consent. I mean, I don't know if this is like extremely simplified. Like, with me, it was like I saw 2 different doctors. There was a 10-month wait between referral. Actually, no, I saw 3 different doctors. Did I? Oh, I can't remember, man. A long time ago. I think it was just 2. I saw 2 different doctors, and then I was able to go on it. They did explain what stuff does and what the risks are and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not super difficult to get hold of like hormones, unfortunately.
Consent. I had a telehealth appointment with a doctor at a gender clinic, and I was diagnosed with dysphoria after this very same appointment after being asked stereotypical questions about my childhood.
This is quite funny, I don't know. Did you play with dolls growing up? Oh, I didn't realize you're the other one. I don't know why that's funny to me.
Which I got my testosterone a few weeks later after getting my blood work done, and then later had an in-person appointment to learn how to inject myself. I initially liked these changes, but I still wasn't satisfied with how I looked. I was passing as a little boy at best, which didn't help with my dysphoria.
Yep, that's a problem you get in general. Yeah, you're not necessarily going to look like a man. You might be a 21-year-old, 25-year-old, way further. But you know, you're more likely to look like a young boy than a man, unfortunately. And some trans men, they're never really going to get past that because you're going to be so small and petite. You'll have, you know, quite young looking features because women tend to stay more neotenized looking than men do.
But I still held on to this hope that I could somehow catch up to biology.
Yeah, this is the thing. Sorry, I'm pausing a lot. This is the thing. You start one treatment, it gives you hope for a bit. Then you start not seeing a huge amount. But it's like, oh, well, the next thing is what's going to happen. The next thing is going to make me feel so much better. And then it carries on and on and on. When actually your mileage varies. And HRT only does so much. Something like surgery. I mean, I've had genital surgery. It's not like you can tell unless I tell you, you know what I mean? The only reason you might be able to tell is if I'm out wearing leggings and you don't notice that there's not a bulge there, you know what I mean? Archangel, yeah, I guess he does. Like, your mileage varies, but it depends on genetics. It depends on, like, your features anyway. It depends on how you would have ended up looking either way. Like how Ellen Page looks like a ring 12-year-old. Jesus. I mean, they kind of do a bit, unfortunately. That's the sad part.
Biological men my age without taking into account that my very skeleton shape would
Yeah, what have I just said? Holy shit.
Ever stop me from ever achieving this goal, which later actually made me want to have like jaw implants or something. Hormone replacement therapy isn't a second puberty after all. It's how your endocrine system reacts to a hormone imbalance.
Oh my god, here we go. Because there was that person, I can't remember who it was, deciding that this lion was like trans or something, the female lion with a mane, because of a hormone imbalance. Like, we should know this shit, because like you give a female testosterone, you know, a female human, they'll grow like facial hair. That's kind of how it is.
Despite this, I eventually reached my goal of passing stealth all the time, albeit as much younger, so I was still disappointed with the results.
I'm finding this quite likable. I don't care. Like, some people might not like the art style or whatever. I'm finding this person quite likable. Like, some of the humor is like, it kind of gets me in a way that I don't expect, you know?
And still had dysphoria over my sex. I felt like I couldn't make friends or results, and still had dysphoria over my sex. I felt like I couldn't make friends or get close to anybody without getting outed. I was also celibate since I didn't want to be with anybody that'd be attracted to me because of how young I looked, as well as desiring to be fully...
Can you imagine? Because you look young, like you end up attracting like n***s and shit, like nasty. Or like only attracting people that are way too young, and it's like, just no, go away. I ain't down with that shit. Jesus.
Transitioned first. Despite my dissatisfaction with my results, I continued transitioning and started to pursue top surgery.
Yeah, people saying, he was saying it is not easy to get like hormones and stuff. What people keep saying is like, oh, well, if you don't give all these kids hormones, they're just going to start getting on the black market. So it kind of sounds like it's fucking everywhere. You know what I mean? Jesus.
I was able to get a letter from a therapist I talked to once over...
A quick look. Diagnosis. Reported symptoms congruent with this diagnosis. Marked incongruence, gender and sex characteristics. Which of course is artificial. Strong desire to be rid of sex characteristics. Experienced gender. What is experienced gender? How do we even begin to like measure that kind of thing? Strong desire for other gender characteristics. Be other gender. Treated as other gender. Okay. Practically prepared to continue as evidenced by a report. He has support from his family. Engaged in supportive resources, which apparently is not true. Ouch. According to WPATH standards of care, this detransitioner. Oh, hi, A. Plotnik. Oh, you've seen this before? Yeah, I like this video, honestly. I think this is good. People were kind of judging a bit on like the art and stuff like that. I think this is cool. It's bizarre how everyone has the same story. And like, we treat it as perfectly normal that everyone has the same story when it's like actual transitioners. And then when detransitioners are doing the same thing, like telling the same story that these transitioners are telling in earnest, suddenly they're making things up. They're like talking shit. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know. I'm quite interested by this, honestly. But yeah, WPATH standards of care. So this person who is now detransitioned met necessary criteria. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. And this is what I keep talking about. You know what I mean? They can't tell who this is actually good for. If you show up as a butch lesbian, I don't like being a woman very much, you're probably going to get fucking done, aren't you? You as a doctor advise against transitioning. Is that breaking the law? It depends how you consider conversion therapy. It depends what your definition is. What the TRA types want to do is decry anything other than affirmation stuff as conversion therapy, which is nuts in my opinion. Should not be like that at all.
Zoom. The first plastic surgery clinic I contacted wouldn't accept this letter unless I would see a therapist consistently before and after, which is good that they enforce that because lawsuits are going to be hella. But
Surge of detransition lawsuits. Detransition is suing the AAP. One of the ones that people are saying, oh yeah, these people are great. These people say it, so it must be true. How nice. How nice. Oh, did I conversion therapy you? Abrasive Productions. Abrasive Productions. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm going to get in trouble now. Wait, they haven't banned conversion therapy in my country, technically. Fuck yeah, I'm golden. I'm golden. I'm going to convert every single one of you. That's a joke.
But, Yeah, instead of going and seeing a therapist, I believed in like this whole, oh, they're gatekeeping if they don't let me get the surgery because women can get their boobs done.
Yeah, as if gatekeeping isn't just a necessary part of basically everything. This is just like spoiled people that don't want to be told no, you know what I mean? Like, medical gatekeeping is such a cancerous term. Of course there is medical gatekeeping, you know what I mean?
So I went ahead and looked for another surgeon.
Oh, don't worry about it, Bracious. I was just making a joke, but if you didn't get it, it's fine. Sissify you. I'll sissify you.
That actually took this letter, and my insurance also accepted it, but I didn't meet my deductible, which has turned out to be some divine intervention in hindsight. Chapter 4, Mushrooms and Detransitioning.
Okay, someone said about taking mushrooms and detransitioning, fair enough.
2 years into my transition, I had the opportunity to try shroom chocolate for the first time, and I decided to try it because I was curious about psychedelics. And when I was tripping, I began having these thoughts and visions about being connected to everyone and everybody, being like cells in a body or atoms. I felt like this trans identity didn't matter, and that it was purely cosmetic and self-serving. I also had an epiphany that my body is healthy and perfect as it is because it allows me to experience life and love, which is what I truly believe we're here for. This made me feel incredibly guilty about the amount of money I was planning on spending on cosmetic surgery to remove my...
Yeah, this is the other thing, like, all this money. You could be doing so much with this kind of money. And like, these people complain about capitalism, these people complain about being poor, driving yourself into fucking debt. I've never tried mushrooms. I hope I get to one day. I think it would be pretty cool. But I've never been able to do it. But yeah, like what I mean, like, so much money that they spend on this kind of stuff, driving themselves into debt. You kind of wonder where some of that anti-capitalist shit comes from in a lot of trans circles.
My breast, which would have been better spent on experiences with loved ones rather than my own physical appearance. After I came down from this, I felt like I could finally take my binder.
Yeah, the kind of things you can do with like 10 grand, buy a cheap car and see a bunch of the world. I don't know. So many things. So many things.
Off and not worry about others' perception of me or my gender.
Mushroom stream when. But I don't know where to get a hold of any. And I'm not saying that I'm going to, because it's probably illegal in my country. And if it is, then I'm never doing them ever, and I don't do anything like that, and I never will, and etc. and etc.
Or stereotypes or anything like that. And soon after, I stopped testosterone too. Chapter 5, My Thoughts on Transition. My advice for people considering transition is to question if you'd be happy being non-passing or openly trans, or if you think you'd only be happy passing and being stealth and fear people finding out you're trans. Having to completely pass all the time and living in fear of being outed really takes a toll on your mental health and quality of life.
Yeah, stealth is very stressful. I mean, I wanted to live stealth. You might look at me and think that's ridiculous. Like, hear what my voice sounds like and think that's like ridiculous. But hey, that's where I was at one point. It meant wearing a shit ton of makeup all the time, which I don't do anymore. Probably looks like I do, but I really don't. You just gotta go out and get them. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can find them not very far from where I live, but it's, I don't know. It's risky, I guess. And I'd always have the paranoia of like some busybody, like, what is it that you're trying to do here?
I also encourage not rushing this decision, as I'm not the same person I was at 18 when I started testosterone and thought this would be my entire life. I'm now...
Yeah, even at 18, like, how far can you see in the future? You might think that you don't want kids at the age of 18, but let's say you get to 25 and you change your mind, you're still extremely young. It's yeah. I'm just not down with like kids transitioning. I'm sorry. Like, holy shit.
I'm 21 and I'm detransitioned, so it's definitely not a choice you want to rush into. I also believe that the cause of dysphoria varies from person to...
What I find, it depends what kind of right-wing audience you have, I guess. There's plenty of right-wingers that watch me, and I find it's a lot more about what kind of person you are and what kind of things you say. Because like the kind of hate I get comes more from like so-called left-leaners than right-leaners, ultimately. I get the odd person that just shows up calling me a tranny. I have no idea what kind of things they're actually about, but yeah, I think it's a bit more about who and what you are, what kind of things you say. And like people will accept you if they like you. So I don't know. If it's not worth coming out over it, then you don't have to. I mean, are you being dishonest with people if it's not really a huge part of your life anyway? I don't know.
A person, so the treatment should also vary. Not every dysphoric person needs medical intervention. I also need to state that psychedelics aren't for everyone since they affect people differently. I do, however, think they have their place medicinally as they work for me, and on that note, I'll go ahead and end this video. Thank you for making it through to the end, considering this is my first time ever doing a voiceover, and it's just not my strong suit. I'm more of just a animate other people's audio kind of person, since, you know. But I also want to mention that I use gender terms when I'm talking about clothes, but I don't believe that clothes are gendered. I just thought it would be more simplistic to explain it that way. But yeah, thanks for watching, and have a beautiful day.
Okay. Rattle that animation. I found that really interesting. It's the same story a lot of the time. And this is the thing, you get into these groups, you want to fit in with them. You think that something explains whatever's making you feel off kilter with the world, which could be your autism, it could be any number of things, especially when you're a teenager. I think a lot of teenagers probably feel a bit off kilter with the world, you know what I mean? So yeah, there we go. I've got another one that I want to look at. This is by someone called Zosia. The truth about being transgender, my detransition story. Hey, don't forget to like the stream. You can check the links in my description. You can super chat via Streamlabs. You can check out my music. So yeah, let's see what this is.
Hello, this is a weird video for me to make, but it's something that I've spoken about on this channel before. And that is the fact that I used to believe, or I used to be trans, and since then I have
So my guess is didn't take tea or didn't take it for a super long amount of time. But then again, you get people like Chase Strangio that don't sound masculine at all, that have clearly been on tea at some point. So hey, let's not prejudge, I guess.
Transitioned. This video is not intended to be transphobic. I'm just talking about my own experience and issues with the LGBT community. I was very young when I started feeling issues with my body and my self-esteem. I was maybe 8 or 9 when I hit puberty, and it was around this time that sort of my anxiety started, that I started feeling discomfort within myself. And when I got into high school, I fell in with sort of an LGBT friend group. In this friend group, everyone sort of aligned their identities so fully with their sexuality or their gender that I began to believe that this was...
Yeah, you find that a lot. Like, I ended up falling in with like LGBT kind of groups, like more after I moved out of home and went to uni, because like I didn't fit in. I felt like I didn't fit in with like straight guys because I was like gender non-conforming or whatever. But truthfully, I guess I just didn't find my crowd. And so you end up going to places like gay bars and stuff. You end up hanging around people, and you get some that it kind of seems like being gay is like the be all and end all, you know what I mean? And that you kind of miss out on much else. Because like most of the friends I made, I have nothing in common with, almost.
Was like normal, that it was normal to have your sort of only personality trait being your gender or your sexuality. And this was how a lot of them like self-identified. I fully remember many of my friends saying, oh, my only personality trait is that I'm gay or whatever. And that was the way that I thought friendships and that I thought people were supposed to be, that we were in this sort of righteous bubble that sort of defied societal conventions. And when I sort of saw the idols that my friends looked up to, people like Elliot Page or Hunter Schafer, I would see posts from trans people that say essentially, I struggled with my body a lot when I was younger, and then I finally realized that I was trans and I decided to fully transition, i.e. like double mastectomy or bottom surgery, and then I finally felt happy. And when you're young, you don't really tend to sort of assess the information that you take in. You sort of...
Yeah, I can imagine. Again, if you're unhappy about something, you probably don't know what it is straight away. And you start seeing this kind of thing. Like, let's say that you're not super happy in your gender, or you don't fit in very well with your own sex, or any number of things. It's very easy to see this kind of thing and think that that might be what helps you as well. And how long is it going to last? How long are you going to be doing this? How many steps are you going to take before perhaps you start realizing that that's not for you,
See, well, at least for me, when I saw that information, I thought to myself, okay, well, not instantly, but over time you come to think, okay, well, that is the solution to issues with your body and issues with your femininity. So I decided very, very early in my life, I think as soon as I was 12 or 13, that the second I turned 16 or 18...
That's the thing. How many kids have body issues, especially young girls and stuff? And it just seems so easy, especially with the kind of stuff out there glorifying trans, to start putting your own stuff on your gender. You see someone else do it. You get convinced that Elliot Page doesn't look fucking miserable because he's saying otherwise. You know what I mean? It's very leading. And it's not good to glorify to people, especially young girls. And when we think about body issues and the fact that young girls seem to be the more likely ones to get them, it starts to add up a little bit as to why it's younger women that are the ones transitioning so young and often coming out as detrans so young, I mean, she's talking about Elliot Page being a thing when she was young. She must be a lot younger than I am.
Or I had raised enough money, I would essentially run away from home and get a double mastectomy and go on testosterone because I was non-binary and I did not feel, or I believed I was non-binary and I did not feel comfortable in sort of being feminine. Now, my parents weren't even necessarily against trans people, but the whole sort of culture of LGBT teens is that you are in some ways
Oh, there's animals around. You can see a chicken, you can see some other stuff like birds and that.
Understood by your parents. That's sort of the way that you perceive yourself to be, or how you perceive your relationship with your parents to be, whether or not, they're supportive or anti-trans. I know now that my parents love me no matter what, but still I would find reasons to sort of resent them and to find sort of excuses to isolate myself further and further from them, probably because this is what my friends were also doing and what a lot of the people I admired went through too, like issues with their parents, which is really sad looking back on it. I mean, I'm very, very...
What's it called? Social contagion. How many of these do I need to watch? How many of these should anyone else watch before starting to accept that this is a thing that happens, that social contagion happens, that you see other people doing stuff, it looks exciting to you, you know what I mean? It happens. And young people are more likely to get swept up in that. That's just how it is. The more impressionable you are, the more likely you are to get swept up in this kind of shit. I had someone telling me that I think that people get tricked into being trans. I don't know if that's what they mean. That because people are impressionable, they end up getting tricked into being trans. It's not about being tricked into being trans. It's just about being led a certain direction. You can go too far very easily, especially when you're younger. That's what it is, not about being tricked. It's about internalizing things. It's about seeing what someone else is doing and possibly wanting that for yourself. I don't know why therapists aren't watching these. More of them should, in my opinion. I mean, we've got plenty of views on this. I mean, almost 500,000. Jesus Christ.
Very skeptical of a movement that directly or indirectly, this is a very charged sort of it's charged vocabulary. I don't intend it to be sort of criminalizing them. But I'm very skeptical of a movement that sort of isolates children from their parents and makes them question their parenting, and almost encourages them to step away and to sort of have a found family rather than
Yeah, one thing I really need to do, and I don't know how I'm going to do this by any means, but like you hear about all these like these trans people that are supposedly like abandoned by their families. My guess is that yeah, it happens. You get like transphobic parents or whatever that don't want to know. But I don't think it always goes that way, and it's presented as if that's the case. And like, you know, it should hopefully be pretty obvious what I think about parents that would like ditch their child because they're trans. Like, that's fucked. But like, how often is it like the kid running away because either the parents aren't as supportive as they want, or they just think that might be the case? How often is it that the kid is so fucking difficult that they get to like an age like 16 or 18 and the parents don't know what else to do with them because they're just not connecting to anything. They're just not doing anything. You want to be part of a group and accept it when you're young. Teenager typical conduct. You kind of do what your group does. Yeah, I agree, Mikhail. Good to see you.
Cooperating with and trying to understand your already family. And it's true too that I had a terrible relationship with my parents and with the rest of my family.
Scared of the mob. I think that was the third. I'm not a transphobe disclaimer. Yeah. It says difficult to post, knowing the inevitable backlash, etc., etc., etc. That's the thing, though. The reason people do this is like exactly what you're saying. And what people will do, like on the trans side, they'll be like, oh, well, you know, if you engaged in this way, then I'd engage with you honestly. But there actually really isn't a way of engaging with them that I've seen. It really doesn't matter. You start being nicer, you'll still get bullshitted. And these people will still think that their unacceptable conduct is just fine. You know what I mean?
When I identified as trans, it was very, very easy to fall into the mindset of no one understands me, I'm from a different generation, my issues are completely unique to me. But the truth is that when I spoke about it later on, sort of after, with a few of the women in my family, they too have...
A trans brother sent a group text to our whole family, to our whole farm, to stop including him in holidays or communication. Oh, family, yeah. Oh, that sucks. Jesus Christ. That's the thing. It goes both ways. And it's one of those things that the way it's put across is that all these kids are getting like rejected by their family or their parents or whatever. When A, not wanting to affirm that kind of thing isn't rejection. It's the parent doing what they think is best. And B, it's just not that simple. It goes all different ways. It happens in all different manners. You know what I mean?
Like struggled with feeling feminine in their younger years. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're trans. And this is one of the biggest issues that I have at the moment. I think it's sort of posited as a solution when really the solution is something else entirely, or rather a teaching of like self-acceptance in a way.
Yes, what I mean, putting things onto your gender, projecting things onto your gender. Or you just don't really understand why you're unhappy, because people are unhappy for lots of reasons. It might take you your whole life to figure out why you have certain feelings, why you feel unhappy about something, because you don't know what it is. And then you see something on the internet, that might be enough. That might lead you down a specific path. Oh, it's my gender, that's what it is. I've always wanted short hair and I'm a girl, therefore it must be my gender. It could be any number of things. And it's terrifying. But people don't want to take that into consideration, despite how hopefully obvious it should be that this can happen.
And no one ever explained to me that puberty would be a difficult time emotionally. I knew, of course, that like hormones were high and like my body would change, but that was about it. No one ever told me that it's a strange feeling going from sort of childhood to adulthood. And the difficulty of that does not point necessarily to your gender identity. It just points to sort of your own discomfort and mental health. I publicly identified as trans or non-binary for 4 years until I was, I think, 15 or 16, and after which I sort of made an Instagram post that said, I'm not trans anymore. And then I think...
Started like 10 or 11. Crazy.
I deleted Instagram and I sort of isolated myself for a very long time because whether or not it was real, I sort of perceived the whole wide world to be against me. So I had sort of built myself into this little victim mindset where I thought that, you know, because of course people didn't fully understand the fact that I was non-binary. I mean, a lot of people did not because we were 12 and 13 and this was a new thing. But I took that very, very personally, and I took that to mean...
Oh, people do. Jesus Christ. I've had people that I've been good friends with. Just the mere mention that I don't really understand non-binary and it doesn't make any sense to me, and it seems to me to just be made up or something that people just come up with for God knows what reason, and that is not very meaningful a thing. Like, that's like enough to cut me off. It's crazy. Like, you come up with something that cannot be observed, that does not have any common traits from one non-binary person to another. And then if you even slightly question it, that's enough for some people. It's crazy. It's utterly insane.
That they were against me when they probably weren't. And so I assumed that the people who had been my friends when I was trans would stop being my friends after I stopped being trans, which was true. My LGBT friend group pretty much instantly disowned me. And I them to some extent, because I was slowly coming to terms with the fact that I did not want to be friends with people who I considered to be superficial. But that's another issue and not one that I'll talk about publicly. The next couple of years after...
The thing is, if all you do is go on about your identity and stuff like that, that is quite superficial in my opinion. I feel like I was lucky in some ways. Like, I started transitioning. I'd already been like a musician for a long time. I already had like interests and stuff like that. I already had feelings of like, I'm not just my sex or my gender or my sexuality or anything like that. So maybe I was lucky in that respect. I was able to keep some of myself, but not everyone gets to. When you start transitioning young, like, that's something that takes over your whole life sometimes. So like, who actually are you beyond your transition, beyond your gender? You know what I mean?
I sort of publicly detransitioned were very, very hard. It was really difficult to sort of re-establish myself, knowing that I had made such a huge mistake. And that was probably amplified by my own feelings of depression and social anxiety. And it was just...
Can you imagine cut ties because you're no longer trans? Yeah, it sucks. I mean, you don't even have to stop being trans. You can just stop agreeing with certain parts of the doctrine, and then people will start coming after you. Like, the amount of trans friends of mine that have like come after me or like said some really quite disgusting shit to or about me because I started questioning one thing or another. And that was it. And like, the entire time, you know, on social media, I'll see them saying all sorts of crazy shit that I think is fucking insane and that I've no idea why anyone would come to the conclusion of. And that's in like, I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to agree with every single thing any one of my fucking trans friends says. But then you start questioning one part of this fucking doctrine and that's enough. And like, yeah, throwing someone away because they're detransitioned, it's insane. Like, we're not supposed to be a cult. That's the whole fucking point. That seems to be biased on your part. It seems gender or sexuality is not the center part of people's lives because they're a 95% or so majority of society and culture is tailored after their desires. I disagree with you there. You'd have to show how society is tailored after anyone's desires. Considering you can be trans and you can get on just fine in society. It really more depends on how you carry yourself, how you engage with other people. What tends to happen is people get over obsessed with this one part about themselves. And then who are they apart from that one thing? There are so many people I know. I have no idea almost anything about them. The only things I know about them is that they're trans and that they're also polyamorous and far left and all this other stuff. I barely know anything about most of these people's like interests and stuff like that. So, all one, I respectfully, I massively disagree, and you would have to show what you're saying.
I don't think I ever fully reintegrated back into like high school society after that because I found it really embarrassing. It was a difficult thing to have gone through so young and to base your whole identity around. And it's such a big thing that when you realize...
The all or nothing vibe is rough with those groups. Yeah, totally. Hi, RV, I hope you're good. I mean, how many more politicized like trans videos do we watch? It's very much, you're with us or against us. It's black or white. It's a terrible way of thinking. This is a cowed, don't know what that means, assimilationist position that not everyone shares. Well, I'm right and they're wrong in that case. I don't know what to tell you. Assimilationist? What other thing is there? All you can do is try and assimilate with society. Society is meant to be something that comes together and works together. It's not meant to be segregated. It's not meant to be little different factions. And it's bizarre, quite frankly, that people will call themselves like far leftists and stuff and want to be anything other than like assimilationist, anything other than want society to come together and want to accept trans people. I know you're saying some really crazy stuff. You're welcome to drop in my Discord and we can talk if you want, because it's really annoying, like dealing with it in chat. I don't know. You're saying a lot of strange stuff, to be honest.
Is that you're no longer that thing. The people around you just turn, essentially. They think that you've been like lying to get attention, which I don't believe I was at the time. I think I was just heavily misguided, and being so young, I was so impressionable. And I read recently that it takes 14...
We see this again and again. The answer is we shouldn't be pushing this on kids. We should be allowing adults to make adult decisions.
...times of being told something for a child to believe it. And so I suppose it could have just...
And even then, the problem is you get adults that are extremely easily led as well.
...been that I was told so many times, it's possible that you're trans, that eventually I started to believe it. And this is...
Yeah, separatism. Like being a trans segregationist, separatist, like that's nuts. I don't know why anyone's down with that shit. It's nuts. Who am I talking about? Oh, there's someone in chat called Old One Eye or something. I'm disagreeing with their takes.
Nothing against the LGBT community, but I think I know a lot of people with stories similar to mine, both personally and online, but no one really talks about them. No one really talks about the rising amount of young women who at some point considered themselves trans, either medically transitioned or didn't, and then came to regret it. The only real time I've heard this discussed publicly or online was through a Joe Rogan podcast with Abigail Shrier, who has also written a fantastic book. But she basically says that to some extent...
Okay, and how many people are going to accuse this person of being a TERF just for mentioning Abigail Shrier and not spurging the fuck out?
And this is nothing against like the transgender community, but to some extent, being transgender now is to depressed teenage girls what, say, anorexia was in the 90s or drugs were in the 70s. It's sort of what girls who have home problems, who have issues with their body, who have issues with their family, it's what they turn to as a solution for their identity. Or not solution, but what they base their identity around. To me, this is so convincing because I can see it now, how incredibly high the levels of transgender people are rising, particularly amongst young teenage girls. I mean, it's
it's not natural. It's not natural to see, like, previously... Well, thank you so much, Toast Gaming. Previously, trans women, aka male to female, were the majority. And then suddenly, after a while, young women start rocketing past. And people want to say, oh, it's just because of increased awareness. It's like mostly young women. This is incredibly unnatural.
High the levels of transgender people are rising, particularly amongst young teenage girls. I mean, it's unprecedented. It's a several 1,000% increase in the last 20, 30 years. And you have to consider that some of that...
I don't know if it's even 20, 30 years. I think it's even less than that. Like, I think it was around 2015 was when FTMs really took over. You know what I mean? That's when the percentage flipped. So I guess it started from a much lower place. Maybe 20 years is realistic, but like it is either way an extremely quick thing. And it's not natural. It doesn't matter what anyone says. It's not fucking natural.
That must be cultural and some of that must be societal. I don't think it happens organically that, you know, such a huge percentage of young girls just wake up one day and realize that they're trans. I don't think that that's organic. I think that is motivated in some way, whether they perceive it to be that way or not. But the trouble with this is, I mean, despite the fact that I date women, not exclusively, I don't identify as being part of the LGBT community because...
Same, fucking hell.
To me, the LGBT community, or the one that I have experienced, clings so much to its beliefs and to its system and its agenda of sort of self-victimization and attacking anyone who disagrees with this experience.
Yes, and it's so bizarre. It takes on this like appearance of like leftism and stuff. Sometimes to the point of like pushing overtly like communist, like socialist kind of shit. But it comes off extremely like individualist. We have someone like saying that I'm like assimilationist. But to me, that should be like the left perspective, is like assimilating as many people as possible. Making, like, uplifting other people to be part of society, because that's what you want, is to be part of society. But instead, what we want to do is go our own way. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's become incredibly like individualistic. And that's not like left-wing values, at least not how I understand them. I guess maybe things have changed. But yeah, I don't know, I feel what she's saying. Jesus Christ. And I'm going to keep having problems. Like, I made friends with a lot of gay and like trans people. Some of them are going to be cool. Like, some of them have been like very supportive. But there's a lot of them that are just going to reject the fuck out of me for saying anything out of step. And that sucks. Like, it shouldn't be that way. That isn't a community sticking together. That's like cult shit, man. That's cult shit.
This is true of a lot of detransitioners, that I can't personally agree with it. I don't think it's right to sort of attack anyone who doesn't agree with your specific dogma. And this is in no way an attack. If anything, it's me speaking about...
I don't fully disagree, Bacon Sani, but what I will say is there's plenty of LGBT, etc. people that have been completely like complicit in all this. Like, every new thing they want to welcome in without caring about what direction everyone's being dragged to, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, it's gone horribly wrong. We've accepted a lot of narratives. We all think that Marsha P. Johnson was trans, which I don't actually think she was, albeit I need to look into more. And that she threw the first brick at Stonewall, and there'd be no gay liberation without trans people, as if it couldn't possibly have happened with other people, as if the movement might not have achieved their goals either way, even if trans people weren't involved whatsoever. Personally, I think it would have. But yeah, like, there's more and more straight people, because the whole queer thing has brought those people into the fold. But plenty of like LGBT people have been and continue to be extremely like culpable, complicit. You know what I mean? They've like helped this shit go along. And like straight people as well, especially straight women. Left individualism exists, as does right-wing collectivism. Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess that's just not the kind of left that I've always understood, you know what I mean? And it feels like it's, you know, we start talking about stuff like communism. It's meant to be about things like equality and like community and stuff. But it seems like it seems like they've moved away from that because they want their own like selfish needs and desires to be met. It's bizarre. It's really bizarre.
About my own experience in, not officially, but rather leaving the LGBT community. And it's a difficult thing to talk about. I know that a lot of people will probably resent me for putting out this video, despite the fact that I've tried to stay as true to my own emotions and experiences as possible. But I do it with no malice in my heart. If anything, I do it out...
Yeah, has this person been rude or like disrespectful in any way, shape or form? And like, I think the comments are probably going to be largely kind at the very least. But you know, this kind of shit is just not okay. It's not okay to just throw these kind of people away. Most of the left that is vocal is very collectivist. I guess I'll believe that when I see it. And maybe we're not talking about the trans left or the queer left so much. Queerism seems extremely individualistic in a lot of ways. Because they want their identity to be like sovereign, I guess. And that's a very individualist thing, in my opinion.
Of empathy for other young girls who are like me, who see this as the new solution to their issues with themselves and their femininity. Every day I am so grateful that like my parents didn't have enough money for me to medically transition at 12 or 13, or that I didn't run away from home and decide to have a double mastectomy, or, you know, that it's difficult for young people in the UK to go through these treatments, that you have to wait so long. Because if I had not had to wait so long on the NHS, I would have regretted it so much. I mean, in the past couple of years, my femininity has brought me so much, and I never would have been able to experience that had I not detransitioned and taken the time to really consider my own identity. And I know I'm not alone, because I personally...
Very interesting video by TIK History, how most of the prominent communist socialist leaders were very individualistic and shared a common coddled childhood. I'll have to look into that. I mean, yeah, there's so much weird shit. Like the weird like communist shit has always rubbed me the wrong way. Like I've been noticing it for a long time now. And it's always been weird to me. Why are so many trans people like coming with these like very specific like political ideologies that've got nothing to do with feeling like you're the other sex to what you are, you know what I mean? Isn't the whole goal of queering MB things just the erosion of traditional structures? I mean, it's going to depend on who you're talking to, but I think there's an overall, there seems to be an overall political goal of that, yeah. Modern left is a weird version of collectivists. They're a self-contradictory mess. Yeah, Jesus, I'd agree with that, yeah, Jesus.
I have at least like 5 to 10 friends that have all done this to some greater or lesser extent. And I think the statistics mirror this too. It's something like a majority of people who transition are equally as depressed as they were before. Then
True, because it just doesn't help that many people. And you keep doing it because you think it's something you have to like grow into. It's something that'll work out with time, or more surgeries or more procedures and stuff. And then what happens when you run out of procedures or you can't afford to do anything else? What happens when you hit the wall? Like that's what happened to me. I stopped getting the kind of affirmation. I stopped seeing myself as a woman, and it's like, well, shit. Maybe that's because I'm not one, and I can't really. I don't really have any ways of like making myself come across more as a woman. But like, what the fuck do I do? You know what I mean? I think that was probably the very first start of my my rising out of the shit. You know what I mean?
they are after. And I think the percentage of suicide goes up very, very highly 5 years and after medical transition for a large percentage of people, which is interesting to me because it was always posited as a life-saving surgery to have sort of top or bottom surgery. And I think it's such a huge decision to make without having been told the other side of it. I mean, things like testosterone, they tell you that it's not permanent, but it is. If you take a look at...
They tell you that testosterone's not permanent? Jesus Christ, I'd need to see like who they mean and stuff like that, but testosterone not permanent? Like, fucking hell. Whoever's saying that needs fucking... If they're in a position of like medical importance, they need removing like yesterday.
Some of the public sort of detransitioners who have been on testosterone, who have become infertile because of it, because that is an inevitable side effect of testosterone.
Yeah, your shit atrophies. And you'll get someone like Zinnia Jones who'll find like one example of a guy who's on T for years and still got pregnant. That is like the overwhelming exception to the rule. You know what I mean? It's basically a given. Your ovaries and shit atrophy.
Who experience joint pains their whole life, chronic pain, fevers, anything like that. It's something that I wouldn't wish on anyone, to look back and realize that they made a mistake. It's such a huge and irreversible mistake to make that if anything I say can help people consider whether it makes them truly happy, then my goal is achieved. All I really want is for people, young women especially, to, before they make any permanent decisions...
Yeah, transition raises the statistical odds of suicide. Like what people will say as like a response or a cope is how I see it. Is that it's because of transphobia, it's because of society not accepting them. Like my overwhelming experience is that society will what's the word? Society will accept you as long as you're an acceptable kind of person most of the time. I've worked in places where I've not even been the only trans person. And largely people didn't seem to accept me very much. But the reason for that is because I'm extremely mental. Whereas other trans people, they're like personable. They get on with people just fine. Like there was another trans person in my department that I knew before like we started working together. And like she was friends with fucking everybody because she's just that kind of person. You know what I mean? You can be accepted as a trans person. Absolutely. And it just makes no sense. Like this whole single cause fallacy thing. It makes no sense to look at a suicide rate that's that high and say, oh, it's because of this. Like, yeah, some people are going to experience so much transphobia that that's where it leads them, of course. And that sucks. And I'm not actually down with transphobia, believe it or not. But there's so many other things to consider. So many other things. You can transition and then still be experiencing gender dysphoria and decide that you're not, you can't deal with that. You can't live your whole life that way. You can realize that you made a mistake and feel like you can't go back, that you're like embarrassed, detransitioning publicly, having to admit that you made a mistake, stuff like that. There are so many different ways that it goes. And it's not just about transphobia. The fact is that it's because of all sorts of different things. Like how many people, like, you've got trans people who aren't going to know other trans people and might feel like they don't fit in with other people because they're trans. They go on the internet looking for like company. They realize that all these trans communities are full of absolute fucking whack jobs. They've got nothing in common with any of these people. So they just go on being alone. Loneliness is a fucking huge problem when it comes to things like suicide. There's like a fucking epidemic of this shit. It's just bizarre. It's bizarre. I keep hearing the 1% regret rate from people. I looked at the study, it was really weak. Just logically, 1% seems impossible. Yeah. A big problem with like studies is that, well, for one thing, a lot of detransitioners will just like ghost their clinics. So what happens is they don't get included in like data because they were lost to follow up, is I think what the term is. And like you can't really include those people in the data. That's fine. I'm not saying they should. But it's just one factor as to why the reported rate in studies is not very reliable. And then what happens meanwhile, because they report that kind of regret rate, like propagandist hack fucks, like someone like Jammy Dodger, for example, will just rotely say, well, actually the regret rate is 1%. And it's like, well, you don't know that. You're basing that on a study that the number is going to be unreliable by default. So you really don't know that that's the case. And the other thing is, presumably, that like regret rate is just going to go up and up post-study. And then it also doesn't account for people that like kill themselves because they do regret transitioning. Like how many other people that are in the 99% that supposedly didn't regret their surgery and everything was great, they end up killing themselves because actually they do. But they're not going to be included in any like data, are they? And then we get to sweep it under the carpet. Oh, they must have killed themselves because of transphobia. It's really quite fucked up. That it's life-saving medication always rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah, I agree. Well, the reason they do that is because there's not very many things worse than like sterilizing someone, especially a young person. Like, what am I trying to say here? So yeah, it's like, well, what's the alternative? Well, you're doing something that's going to sterilize you. Well, yeah, but they might kill themselves if they don't. So that's how they do that. Yet there's really not that much evidence of like this epidemic of like young people killing themselves because of the lack of access to gender affirming care. And whether it does or not, Maya Poet. Did Maya Poet take testosterone? I was under the impression she like desisted from identity. I mean, that would kind of, maybe I should find that next, actually. I don't know. It's a very controversial figure.
Take a long look inwards.
Oh, wait, no, I probably don't have time, unfortunately. I do need to look at that, though.
Heal your mental health, first of all. That is the biggest thing, I think. Heal your mental health and then consider if you still feel uncomfortable within your own sexuality or gender. Because for me, after I healed my mental health,
Belgian trans. I'm not sure. If you have a name, I can look it up. I've heard of euthanasia being used for people like that. I think there was someone in the Netherlands that was talking about wanting that. I know you can get euthanasia in the Netherlands for things like depression.
I feel almost no inclination towards like masculinity or androgyny. And I think that's the case for a lot of people who sort of experience depression in their earlier years, but then change as they get older. It's a terrible mistake to make. And
yeah, because you're unhappy and you're a kid. You don't know why you're unhappy. So you see something that looks attractive, that looks new and different, and that your friends are all getting on with. You might end up on the same train. It's terrifying to me. We should not be letting kids anywhere near this shit. Someone like Elliot Page, their entire fucking shit should be fucking 18 and over, in my opinion. I guess it's extremely difficult to like, and possibly a bit authoritarian to like force that kind of thing. So you can't really do that, unfortunately, but it's quite terrifying. Like someone like Jammy Dodger. Children should not be watching people like Jammy Dodger. No fucking way.
I hope that is made a lot less often. Obviously, it's not a mistake for everyone. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about the select few who are socially pushed or socially nudged into it. I'm so grateful every single day that I did not make any medical choices that would have affected me my whole life now. Because if I had had the choice when I was 12 or 13, I fully would have believed, yes.
Nathan Verhelst. Belgian helped to die after 3 sex change operations. Oh, this was 2013. Wow. Born a girl. 3 operations. Was this like a phalloplasty thing? Like, phalloplasty is fucking crazy. Anyway, yeah. Nuts. Crazy.
I want to be infertile my whole life just for this. And now having children is like my number one goal in life.
Yeah, so when I watched a Mr. Menno video, and he showed someone in the Netherlands that was talking about whether he should just try and get euthanasia because he was medicalized, I think, as a child, and then desisted off of it later in life.
It's my biggest goal. It's my dream now to have children, and it breaks my heart that that could have been taken away from me if I had been encouraged just a little bit more.
What do I keep saying?
Or by my parents, or by, you know, the system or the NHS or anything like that. But yeah, this video has no hate towards trans people. I just want everyone to consider my own perspective and my own experience as someone who has detransitioned, and having been on both sides of sort of deep within the LGBT community, and then having left it, having stopped being depressed, having come to a lot more happiness in my life. And yeah, again, I only send love and hope and peace out to all of you, and I hope that you find peace within yourself if you're watching this video. And yeah, love you. Bye.
There you go. That was really interesting. I don't know. I'll just have to keep watching these kind of things because, I don't know, you have to hear both sides of it. And you can't just assume that everyone who's trans and tells a certain story is telling the truth, and everyone who's not trans and is telling a certain story is lying, you know what I mean? And that's what people do. And part of the problem is this like black and white shit. This two sides thing. There isn't two sides. There's just fucking people, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'll have a look at this next. So this is someone called Maddie Edwards. I transitioned and here's what happened. My detransition story. Let's have a look.
What's up, my name's Maddie, and I want to share with you how I went from this to this. To the person that you see sitting in front of you today. What's up, my name's Maddie, and I want to share with you how I went from this to this to the person that you see sitting in front of you today. As you can tell from the title, I am a detransitioner.
I'm sorry if it's quiet. I've cranked it as much as I can. Actually, I'll do what I can do.
Born a woman, I transitioned to male through hormones and socially transitioned and have since detransitioned. I stopped taking hormones and now go by my birth given name. Let's start from the beginning. So whenever I was a young kid, I was not your
I'm going to guess straight off the bat, lesbian. Fashion sense kind of indicates that way. I could be wrong, I guess. But it's very common that it goes that way. Voice gone for it. Yeah, jeez. I mean, hey, you know, if they're happy having a deeper voice or whatever, I guess it's fine. You get some people that talk about how they took tea, they can't really sing anymore, they don't like the way their voice sounds, and that sucks, honestly.
typical girly girl. I was what people would call back then a tomboy.
A tomboy, here we go.
I was definitely barefoot, climbing trees, collecting rocks, building things for the barn cats to climb on, like, you name it, outside, I was doing it, okay? So, when did I start questioning my gender? I don't know the exact age. I was raised in a Christian household, and I remember being...
Christian household, probably rebelling to a certain extent. Very common thing for teenagers to do. You feel like you're being held back from certain things that you might want to experience yourself. Makes it seem more attractive in some ways because it's rebellious to do.
Pretty young and just praying that I would just wake up the next morning completely as a boy and that no one would ever remember that I was a girl and I could just be a boy because I felt like that's what I should be. I didn't know the term transgender, but that's what I was feeling and that's what I was praying for. I was like, God, just wake me up a boy. Don't let anybody remember that I was a girl and my life will be perfect. And clearly that didn't happen. But I was always kind of jealous of the boys. Nobody ever tried to get them to wear a dress. Obviously, no one was ever telling them that they weren't ladylike. In my mind, I was just another boy. Like, I didn't fit in with the other girls. I just have always felt more masculine.
Yeah, gender nonconformity can be confusing, especially for a kid. If your parents aren't necessarily very understanding, that might go even more so.
Which is okay, by the way. You don't have to be a boy just because you feel masculine. But anyways, I digress. Okay, let's get into my preteen and early teen years. I was always wanting to wear baggy clothes. I always wanted to wear the boy shorts or whatever. Whenever I'd be in PE, I'd always be challenging the boys to like arm wrestling or races or something to that effect to kind of prove myself to myself and prove myself to them that I was like equal to or better than them. I was always trying to beat the boys in something to like, yeah, kind of prove who I felt like I was. So when did I find out what the term transgender was? I think I was around 13 or 14. I was Googling around trying to figure out why I felt the way that I did. And I came across this term and I was like, what? Like, this all makes sense. Perfect. I can fix it. There's a solution. I can transition. I watched pretty much all of the YouTube videos that there were at the time of people who were born female and started taking testosterone. And I was,
Yeah, it's going to encourage you. That's all that happens. People feel weird in their sex. People don't relate to others of their sex because you might just not be built that way. You're gender non-conforming or whatever. You end up going looking for information and everything that these people talk about describes you. So yeah, you're getting pulled down the fucking path. Like necessarily. And it sucks.
like so jealous of the changes that they were getting, like the body hair, the deep voice, the facial hair, the surgeries, everything that they were getting. I was like, wow, I want to do that one day. Like, that's how, like, there's nothing.
Like you start wondering, honestly, if like younger kids should be able to watch shit like Jammy Dodger and stuff like that. Like, if that's not the kind of person this person saw, then they saw other people very similar. And that's what they're doing. They're putting things out there where a child will listen to it and be like, oh, that's me. That means I must do the same thing, when actually it's quite an extreme thing that you're doing. One of the boys is perhaps the best Puna meme out there. Zipper tits, bear grill, bare chest, cooking veggies on a grill. Ouch. I've never seen that one.
Wrong with me. This is who I'm supposed to be. It felt like such a relief to know that I wasn't alone in the way that I felt. And at the time, I felt like it was a solution.
This is so dangerous. It's so fucking dangerous. Like, a huge thing to understand. Just because you like relate to a trans person's experience, that doesn't mean that that's true of you too. Absolutely not. Like, it might have been right for them. Who fucking knows, ultimately? Because I think in more extreme cases, it kind of is right for people sometimes. But that doesn't mean it will be for you. And that's what people are talking about. Like, a lot of these kids will just desist from these feelings. Well, we're seeing the results of that when people are making these decisions far too young. And that's every single thing I watch is confirming to me that younger kids shouldn't be having these ideas put in their heads. Absolutely not. Ariel Scarcella photo. I'll have to have a look in a bit.
To all the like inner turmoil stuff that was going on, like, you know, going through puberty, my body was changing. I was like growing breasts, like your period starts, all that fun, not so fun stuff. So once I figured out what the term transgender was, and I saw all these videos of these people getting on hormones and getting top surgery and all that stuff, I was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. This is what I need to do to feel myself. I need to go through with these things. I made an account online going by the name of Ryder. I would take my hair and put it up in a beanie and like take pictures of myself posing as a boy, trying to express myself through that. Eventually I got found out. It did not go so hot. So I ended up kind of reverting back to being in the closet, I guess, and trying to be this girl, trying to be feminine, trying to wear makeup, trying to wear like the skinny jeans and be a girl. Okay, if there's any right way to be a girl. I started trying to date guys. You know, I was just trying to be the typical girl. trying to do these different things. But I felt so uncomfortable in my body and the way that I was presenting as female. It really, I had so much anxiety and so much depression because I didn't feel like that was me. I just did not feel like I was supposed to be a girl. I felt like I was supposed to be a man. So around the end of my 19th year of life, I decided to go on testosterone.
They haven't mentioned whether they actually like boys or, well, men or women. I'm 99% sure this person is a lesbian, but I don't know if they've actually said, to be fair.
I went to a handful of visits with a counselor, and the counselor wrote me a note to an endocrinologist saying that I
At least she still looks feminine. Yeah, of course. The thing is, like, it seems like plenty of people get lucky when it comes to like taking testosterone, but you're gonna get some that like they're gonna lose a lot of their hair and stuff like that, and you detransition. It's like that Casey Miller person. Like, you're not gonna be happy detransitioning and then having reverse dysphoria. It's bad enough with like the voice and stuff like that. Like, who knows how they're feeling? Like, getting this like reverse dysphoria now they realize they're not actually trans, and now they feel kind of the way that trans people do because there's a part of them that's forever changed. Again, based on a decision they made as a kid. Like, why are kids able to make these decisions? It's nuts.
had dysphoria and that I should go on hormones. So I went to this endocrinologist, is that how you say it? In Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I got my first prescription for T. The first visit that I went to the endocrinologist is when I got my testosterone. Every week I had to inject myself in the thigh with testosterone. I don't remember how much I was on, but you did one thigh, one.
Yeah, I mean, started at 19. That's an adult age, sure. But like, when did they make that decision? How long have they been feeling that way? How long have they been kind of holding themselves back because they're so obsessed over this like one thing that they might not have matured as much because of it?
Week, and the next week you do the other thigh, and that's just what I did every week until I was about 23. Don't get me wrong, I missed a couple weeks. I am horrible with being consistent. My voice started to change, it was dropping. I was so excited about that because I had been trying to socially transition, but every time I opened my mouth in public, everyone knew I was a girl. But that started to change as I was on hormones and my voice started getting deeper. I didn't get clocked as a girl as often. I ended up moving cities, and no one really knew that I was transgender unless I told them. I spent my time working, drinking, smoking, living my best life, doing the thing, being who I thought I was supposed to be, right? Up until that point.
Smoking and taking testosterone together is dangerous, by the way. You have more risk of like blood clots. I think it's quite bad if you're on estrogen as a male, but like the other way around, it's also bad. Like, you have risk of like blood clots from that kind of shit. Like, you can actually fuck your own health up that way easily.
I didn't really have a relationship with God. I never believed that there wasn't a God, but I just didn't have a relationship. Eventually, I started praying. One of the times that I was praying, I had an encounter with God. Basically, I was just talking to God, and I was asking him some questions and asking him about my family, because whenever I was going through testosterone and whenever I lived in the other city, they didn't really have anything to do with me. I wasn't really allowed to see my siblings because of all the changes that were happening. My parents didn't want my siblings to see that, so I wasn't around them. And I understood because I knew their views. It hurt, but I didn't hate them for it. I just knew that that's just how it was, and I kind of just sacrificed my relationship with my family to try and be this person that I thought I was supposed to be. But anyways, I was talking to God, and I had finally gotten my relationship back with my family a little bit, and they were letting me and my fiance at the time like come into their home and hang out with them. And I don't know, I didn't know what changed, but I started praying and I asked God, how did it go from them not wanting anything to do with me to now allowing me and my fiance, who was a woman, into their home? Like, allowing us to be around them and just.
Who is a woman? I told you. Knew it. Fucking knew it. How many of these kids, like, maybe they're in a conservative household that doesn't really understand their sexuality, that contributes to it. But being a lesbian isn't being a man.
Showing us genuine love and treating me like just another normal human being. It's like I heard the voice of God say, I gave them the spirit of love. And I have that same spirit of love if you would stop running from it. And in that moment, I knew that I needed to detransition, and I knew that I needed to break off my engagement with my fiance. Mind you, I hadn't been talking to anybody about God. I hadn't been talking to anybody about religion. Nobody had been asking me to go to church. I hadn't, none of that for years. It was just me talking to God, and I had this revelation. It was like, I have better plans for you it was this insane amount of love that I felt that overflowed into even self-love. Like, I didn't ever think that I would love myself as a female, as the way that I was born. Didn't think that would ever happen. Never crossed my mind. And then I had this encounter with God, and he just lavished so much love onto me that I started to see myself the way he did, and I began to love the way that he created me. And I didn't feel the need to continue in transition. I didn't feel the need to try to be somebody that I wasn't born as. So after that moment, I began my detransition process, which was very difficult, but not near as hard as I thought it would be. Because again, I never thought that I would love myself or be able to live with myself if I stayed the way that I was created. If I lived my life as a woman, I did not think that I would ever be able to do that and be okay with it. I didn't think that I'd ever be able to accept myself without hormones and surgeries and all of the whole 9 yards. But when I had that encounter with him, he was like, no, I created you perfect the way that I designed you to be. You don't have to wear dresses or makeup or be the girliest girl around. Like, I created you with a purpose, exactly how you were supposed to be. So after I had this revelation with Christ, I started, asking more questions. I would pray more and build my relationship with Christ. He opened my eyes to a lot of the things that got me to the point that I was at, that I never would have even thought about had he not shown them to me.
I mean, this is obviously they're talking about finding their way back to religion or whatever. But people this person's talking to God. People ask themselves these same kind of things. Like, is this really very different to how some other people navigate their way out of this shit when they start realizing that actually what they thought was one problem is another problem? I don't know. Like, self-therapy is kind of a thing that ends up happening, especially when you don't have much around to help you personally. It can take many forms. It kind of sounds like just another way of that, you know what I mean? Comes off as a bad coping mechanism. I can't be gay, I must be in the wrong body. Yeah, well, that's very common. Why do you think so many of these people are like young lesbians?
I believe that some of the main reasons that I wanted to transition in the first place stemmed from a distrust for men. My dad's worked on himself a lot since then, so like, I love you, Dad, if you're watching this, but I wanted to be a better dad than he was whenever I was younger, and I wanted to be a better husband than he was to my mom. I wanted to be a better boyfriend than the boys that I had tried to date whenever I was younger, because those experiences did not.
Got in touch with her and truth, heard it as coming from God. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean, yeah. Like, is a different framework for a process that I think happens in quite a lot of people in a lot of different ways. You know, I've kind of had to go through that same kind of thing myself, because that's what happens when you continue to feel so at odds with everyone, despite having transitioned, thinking that's going to help, and despite it seeming to help for a little while, and then it stops helping. You know what I mean? Like, I've gone through similar kind of processes. It's just that there wasn't a framework of God because I'm not religious myself. So I do still hear what she's saying, and I do still relate. It's just a different way of getting the message, I guess. The thing about God stories that take the critical thinking on yourself and pass it to a mystic level. Well, yeah, but you can still see the same through line. You can still see the same process. I can see the same process as when I was trying to fucking understand my own shit and self-therapize myself. Like, I wrote a whole album about that whole thing, which is linked below, by the way. Check the links in my description. And people just have different ways of coming to conclusions and understanding themselves. Like, this is just a framework. Like, she's talking to God and that's how she sees it. Is it God or is it something within themselves that they're finally communicating with? I mean, that's not me trying to undermine their experience. But if I were to try and understand it in my own terms, I guess that's how I'd put it. And if this person was to understand the way that I kind of started coming out of a lot of the feelings and thoughts that I had, they might interpret it as being like a religious thing, even though to me it wasn't. You know what I mean? Problem is, 20 years ago, you have these thoughts and I'd process them by yourself. Today you go online. Yeah. I mean, she says about going on YouTube and stuff. This is what I mean. This is a huge reason why I started this channel, was because I was very interested in what people are seeing. When you look up trans on the internet because you're young and confused, and you hear about this and think it might help you, you might find all kinds of things on the internet. And a lot of it, in my opinion, is extremely dodgy and probably shouldn't be being shown to children. and shouldn't be glorifying certain things. You'll get people that will come along in Jammy Dodger's chat, oh, I watched your video and then I decided to transition. I'm so happy. You don't know how many of those people writing those comments 2 years later maybe are starting to have their own awakenings and realizing that they might have put other things onto their gender, because that happens all the time. Like whether it's homophobia, whether it's, you know, parental issues, whatever it is. There's so many things.
Go great, they didn't respect me, and I wanted to treat a woman with love and respect. And so I sought that out. I just wanted to be that protector and that provider the way that a man should treat a woman. And I didn't trust a man to do that. So I wanted to take it into my own hands to be this man, be this protector. Anyways, now here we are today, and I have a beautiful daughter. She's 6 months old. And I am
Oh, wow, good on her.
so grateful. I don't think I can picture my life without her now. So I'm very grateful that that was able to happen. This video is going to need a lot of editing. So if you enjoy...
Yeah, I mean, they also talk about, like, the way their dad treated their mom. I mean, I don't know. The way I understand things like CPTSD, it can come from seeing one of your parents mistreat your other parent, like witnessing that kind of thing. That can cause trauma as well. And trauma is a very common thing that we see with trans people, unfortunately.
enjoyed this video and want to see more content from me, go ahead and hit the little subscribe button. Maybe hit the notification bell so you don't miss when I upload. I'm going to try to upload at least once a week, so we'll see how that works. Anyways, I love you guys. Jesus loves you, and I pray you have a perfect day.
There you go. I know, I'll keep watching stuff. It's interesting to me. I think detransitioners should be heard. I think there's a lot to learn from these kinds of people. Fix my sound again because that was very quiet. But yeah, there was some of the comments were a bit interesting. Like, these comments are wild. You'll need to chill. I don't know what this means. Sounds like you can't handle being a man. Like, what the fuck? Ironically, Christian conservatives are responsible for the rigid gender roles that make you feel like this in the first place. Is that true? Is that true? I didn't know about that, man. Bizarre. Hopefully you'll have some sympathy for trans women. Why are we talking about this? Since you're stuck with that deep voice the rest of your life and you'll experience discrimination from people who think you're a trans woman. I don't know if people are going to think that person's a trans woman just because of their voice. You get deep-voiced women. And someone else talking about other stuff you can do. Ended up straight or inseminated. They didn't say. They're at the very least bisexual. I'm fine asserting that. They're talking about wanting to be a good partner to a woman. There's obviously some attraction there to women, whether it's bi or gay. Damn, you were so fine as a man. Jesus Christ. A lot of God stuff, which is fair enough. A Christian perspective. I think that religious perspectives are as interesting as anyone else's perspective, even if I'm not religious myself. You'd never heard about transgenders, you would have grown up normally. Yeah, probably, yeah. You'd be amazed how many girls are tomboys. And still I'm a tomboy at age 75, but I didn't want to change my sex. Yeah. I pray you get help. I don't know what they mean by that. Why are people doing this to themselves? I mean, that's why you watch these videos, so you understand. People are not happy. They're finding ways of dealing with that, often displacing the way you feel onto other things. It's just not helping. It's just not helping people. To be honest, a lot of the comments are pretty normal. I don't know. Damn, your voice is fucked. Oof. 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 I mean, people keep talking about, like, conservatives, like Christians, gender roles and stuff like that. There's places you can go elsewhere in the country, on the planet, should I say. I think the gender roles are far more rigid and forceful, you know what I mean? Why are there so many God haters in this comment section? Yeah, they probably are. How sad religion ruins people. Why, it's sad that this person's no longer a trans man? Why would that be sad? Ideally, people shouldn't have to transition, right? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that was interesting, I thought. Maddie Edwards. I know, I'll keep watching stuff. Yeah, anyway, there we go. I wanted to look at this Maya Poet thing quickly. Conservatives don't even need to drum up this hate. You do it all by yourself. See, there's definitely hate coming from that camp, but the thing is, it's gone both ways for a long time. A lot of trans people will jump wholesale into hating on the other side too. And so obviously the division has just become worse and worse and worse. And we're not just politicized because one side we've decided hates us or doesn't agree with certain things that we're able to do. But like, we've divided ourselves, ultimately. We've put ourselves into one camp, which is a fucking terrible idea. Terrible thing to do. Never should have gone that way. Remember that America banned 1984 for being too pro-communist, but Russia banned it for being too anti-communist. Yep, that sounds about right. It's one of those things that all kinds of extremists will use as if it was written for them about everyone they hate. And it's bullshit. Ty could have changed his passport once Trump had elected and was elected and had zero problems with travel. Yeah, probably. And he's rich enough, maybe he would have had it expedited somehow. I don't know. Depends how it works, to be fair. But yeah, he's like, what's he freaking out about? I genuinely can't tell from that video. Anyway, yeah, I want to watch this thing here. This Maya Poet person is quite a controversial figure, from what I can tell. A lot of people calling them like a desister rather than a detransitioner. Although we're talking about binding here, which is not necessarily the most reversible thing, you know what I mean? So yeah, the hidden harms of binding, my story. They told me it was safe, they told me it was necessary, they told me it would help. For over a decade, I believed them. For 10 years, between the age of 12 to 24, I bound my chest every day, convinced it was the only way to feel comfortable in my body. No doctors warned me, no activists mentioned the risks. Now I'm left with permanent pain, irreversible damage, realization I was sold a lie, etc., etc. Yeah, so as far as I know, this person was never medicalized. And I never know what to think. Like, there's a lot of people that consider this person like grifting. They've definitely fallen into like the other side of the fence. And like they push a lot of the MAGA kind of stuff. You could maybe argue they traded one like thought cult for another. I'm not sure. I don't really know this person super well. So, oh yeah, my little thing moves. But yeah, they very much, you know, they're on the circuit now. They're pushing this kind of thing. They're one of the people that have gained a lot of prominence from this detransition. And there's definitely like what seem to be accusations of like stolen valor, like, you know, having not really gone through the same as quite a lot of other stuff. People seem to think this person might be faking. I have no idea what's true in that respect. I don't know. Maybe someone will watch this and put me straight, because I find it very hard to trust any information I'm given, like, ever anymore. Whether it's from someone like this or about someone like this. Maya got tons of hate for being Israeli. Yeah, it seems that way. I mean, yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ. I'm not even gonna begin to get into that whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see what they're saying. To me, are they a desister if they've been binding for this long and it's left with permanent effects? It's a bit dicey. It's a bit hairy. It's a bit, what's the word? Ambiguous, maybe. But I don't know. Tumblr hates this person. Yeah. A lot of people do.
Hi everyone, my name is Maya Poet. I'm 25 years old and I'm a detransitioner. In this video, I'm going to be reading from an essay I've written on Substack called Breast Binding, Genital Tucking, and the Lie of Safe Gender Affirmation. I'd like to thank you in advance for listening to my story. Following Trump's executive order suspending the use of federal funding for gender-affirming care for young people under the age of 19,
seen some longer interviews, including photos in mask mode from earlier years. Yeah, there's quite a few out there. I've been a bit hesitant watching stuff about this person because they're extremely divisive, and a lot of people assert a lot of things that I really have no way of verifying, and I really don't know the truth. I really don't know what I think, quite honestly.
Interventions such as puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and transgender surgeries will become less easily accessible to young people. While this executive order has the immense potential to spare many youngsters from the harms of the medical interventions outlined in the legislation, our fight to end gender ideology is nowhere near over. With medical interventions out of reach for many indoctrinated in gender ideology youths, interventions like breast binding and male genital tucking will be the only ones available to sex-distressed children and teenagers. Without even a single visit to a gender clinic, tens of thousands of kids who use binders and tucking devices will continue to permanently damage their developing body.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing about things like binding and stuff. You don't really need to do anything. All you have to do is get hold of a binder of some kind. It's not like HRT where you at least need to see a doctor and stuff like that. It really is something anyone can do, and whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not sure.
Bodies, while sustaining mental health harms that may last a lifetime. The harms of social transition, of breast binding, and of genital tucking still remain largely unaddressed. These harms receive virtually no media coverage in the culture war because the scars they etch into the minds and bodies of young people aren't visible to the naked eye. Yet these are the harms which afflict every single young transitioner, whether they are of the minority who proceed with medical transition, or whether they are of the majority who do not. How do I know? In short, because I lived this reality for half of my life. From the ages of 12 to 24, I identified as transgender after having been exposed to the concept online. My parents had the sense to not affirm the transgender identity I had declared as a 12-year-old. And knowing that my brain was not fully developed, my parents put many obstacles in my way to decrease the chance that I would medicalize before the age of 25. However, this did not stop me from using a binder to flatten my breasts, which enabled me to continue playing cross-sex make-believe into my 20s. Breast binding made me feel like I was breathing through a straw. Without realizing it, I had changed the way I moved, breathed, stood, walked, and slept in order to accommodate the cage my upper body had grown into over the course of a decade. Though I did not step foot inside a gender clinic and quit my transition before injecting toxic doses of testosterone or getting my breasts
Tucking devices? I think there's like underwear or something. Yeah, you get like underwear and stuff that that does stuff. I don't know. Tucking is something I know nothing about. I never did it when I had, you know, when I had my natural anatomy, shall we say. Definitely, obviously do not need to do that now.
amputated. I am now living with the harms to my body and mind that the medical establishment is helpless to set right. The prolonged breast binding, including with a supposedly safe binder, has permanently disfigured my breast tissue, it has damaged my posture, and has left me in pain while breathing. I am now unable to wear anything but a high compression sports bra if I wish to engage in even the lowest intensity physical activity without experiencing excruciating pain. Even if Trump's executive orders manage to survive legal challenge, simply banning medical transition for under 19s will not protect young people from sustaining permanent harms to their minds and bodies as a result of their adolescent gender questioning. When puberty blockers are not available to a gender dysphoric girl, she will bind her breasts as soon as breast buds begin to develop, using specially designed garments or tape that will flatten her breasts. The boys will tuck their growing genitals to create the appearance of a smooth crotch, a practice that originated from drag queen culture. These shocking, dangerous practices have been promoted not only by online influencers, but by doctors and teachers. There is, after all, tucking underwear available in sizes for small children. Routinely compressing breast and genital tissue, which is not supposed to be compressed, does damage to an individual, both psychologically and physically. Just how harmful these interventions are has not been well studied in either adults or in growing children. Despite the lack of evidence, these gender-affirming interventions are marketed not only as safe, but as life-saving. Binding is a far more dangerous and harmful intervention than anyone gives it credit for. Both hospitals and online trans activists promote breast binding as gender-affirming care, with guidelines about how to do it.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, I guess this person hasn't been medicalized, so people will refer to them as like a desister, rather than a detransitioner. But that's not to say that you can't end up getting like permanent effects from some irreversible treatments. I don't know. I feel like I'm not going to learn very much because I think I know why people have such a problem with this person. And there's definitely a lot of things they say that I do not agree with, like on Twitter and stuff like that. But there's just so much shit flying around, like especially around detransitioners, like when they're outspoken. There's always so much shit flying around. I never know what I'm supposed to trust. It's fucking annoying because like I'll look at people like this and like I'll get people telling me, oh, don't you know this, that, and the other? Like this person's like bad and stuff. And it's like, well, I don't know, man. Like, how would I even begin to verify any of that? And it's not like people like to bring like evidence or anything. I seem to get it so often. People don't want me to like come up with my own fucking thoughts or perspectives, even if it means me maybe being occasionally a bit behind the curve on others. Because I don't know. If people want me to believe a certain thing, they should probably just evidence it and show what the problem is. Like, it's quite fucking easy.
Safely, without any studies attesting to the assertion that compressing breast tissue, lungs, and the rib cage, especially of growing a child, can even be done safely. These garments can be easily bought online and have been given secretly to children at school. There is no precedent for what a woman should expect.
Yeah, that I find hard to disbelieve. I mean, fucking hell. A kid comes up saying that they're a man now or they're a boy now. The parents might not even know. They might be doing all sorts. And like, I don't know. A teacher gets a binder for a teenage girl who then desists years later and now has problems because of their binding. Like, that could cause immense problems for that teacher, no? If they like sue or something. Is that something a kid could do if they were provided that kind of stuff? But binding, yeah, I've heard stuff about that. Doesn't sound good. Not something I'd want to do.
Expect after quitting a long-term binding regimen while still having her breasts. For example, the impact of long-term compression on functions such as breastfeeding is still unknown. We know that tucking can cause rashes, itching, testicular pain, and testicular torsion, but we know very little about the extent to which preoperative tucking can impact postoperative surgical results. We also know very little about the impact of genital tucking on fertility, or on how to help men emerge from their gender journeys and who still have their genitals intact recover from any lasting pain they may experience. The line between online activism of transgender...
Yeah, I'm not big on social transition for minors either. I think it makes far more sense to let kids kind of explore and let kids try out stuff and not label it and not change their name and not start saying that they have to be this, that, and the other now. I think that slapping labels on these kind of things is a bad idea because you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know whether that's really them or not. And the thing is, if you're slapping a label on it and referring to them in that way, you're creating affirmation for something that they might not even really be, that might not even be right for them, you know?
Gender influencers and the doctor's office is non-existent. Trans activists will tell young people to not use unsafe binding and tucking methods, while instructing them in detail about how these easily obtainable...
Yeah, they'll say that, like, there are methods that are safe, when really there aren't.
...unsafe binding and tucking alternatives work. Both activists and doctors are quick to say that binding is safe when done properly. From my experience, this is yet another gender-affirming lie. No one who encouraged me to bind my breasts at 12 informed me that even the safe binding methods would leave me with this level of pain and deformity. No one told me that this damage would be permanent. Youngsters are further convinced that these practices can be done safely, because doctors have released binding and tucking guidelines, which are taken directly from the recommendations of trans activists rather than from any clinical studies. These guides read more as advertisements than as legitimate medical advice. Binding and tucking, according to this guidance, is safe when done with products purchased from approved companies for a maximum of 8 hours a day. Because no studies have been done showing why the maximum wear time should be 8 hours, as opposed to literally any other arbitrary number, and because these interventions only further entrench someone's sex-based discomfort,
They've probably been on Buck Angel, yeah.
almost no one follows them. Many trans influencers film their gender journeys from the phase of ideation and identity exploration all the
Also seems to be this Munchausen by proxy badge of honor for progressives to have a trans trial. Hey, maybe. You see it with celebrities quite a lot. I don't know. Fucking weird, in my opinion. Like, if I had a kid and they came back to me one day saying I'm trans, I'd be fucking mortified. I'd be terrified.
way to post-surgery. They commonly joke about wearing their binders for too long and having saggy breasts, bad posture, or concave rib cages. They conceptualize of this damage as an unfavorable aesthetic outcome, which will become irrelevant when they remove their breasts. And now, we begin to see the way that the dangers of gender transition actually unfold. Not as a set of discrete interventions which cause harm only when a gender clinic is involved, but as a trajectory which only begins to cause harm from the moment that an idea is adopted. Kids embark upon the process of transition, thinking that it'll resolve their psychological distress. Their ritualistic binding and tucking, which once seemed necessary to alleviate the psychological discomfort they've labeled as gender dysphoria, turns into physical discomfort.
People using ace bandages and duct tape, which are even more dangerous. The binding was safer, which is where the guidelines came from, with the caveat that no binding is safe. Then the last part disappeared. Holy shit, really? Fucking hell. Well, it's crazy. I mean, I don't know. The other thing is, when you're giving these out to like kids, are you gonna expect them to understand like the permanence of like, oh, the potential permanence of their decision to start binding and stuff like that? Because they don't know. Like, they might think at the time, well, I'm gonna want to get them cut off anyway, so I don't really care. But like, you don't know that you're always gonna feel like that. And when you're a kid, that's even more of a risk.
The process of modifying the appearance of sex traits through compression becomes inextricably tied to the young person's embrace of a new cross-sex identity. The pain that was once psychological now becomes new physical pain. All this pain sustained in the pursuit of authenticity and happiness must then be treated through body part removal. Because our brains and bodies do not exist separately, the obsessive young person's fixation on cross-sex embodiment throws them into a nearly intractable feedback loop. Their distress becomes their identity. The affirmation of distress turns into more distress as they begin to compare themselves to opposite-sex peers with whom they cannot biologically measure up. Then, they begin to modify their behaviors and bodies in an attempt to become the impossible. What starts as an idea becomes an unending, escalating, obsessive pursuit of feeling better, which only carries the risk of more severe and permanent damage the longer one continues on this trajectory. The notion that banning gender treatments for under 19s will decrease the magnitude of harm done to those incapable of consent is based largely on the knowledge that kids who experience prepubertal onset gender dysphoria, who are not socially transitioned, are likely to outgrow their dysphoria as they complete puberty.
Well, there's studies that suggest that way. Is it knowledge? I don't know if that's the same thing. I have to try and be like consistent, you know what I mean? We have studies suggesting. The problem is, how the fuck do you know? Like, how do you even begin to measure something like that? Because, you know, they're going to see, like, you take kids that say they're trans. You affirm some of them, you don't affirm others. You treat some of them, you don't treat others. There's like ethical concerns like out the ass with stuff like that. So it's very difficult to really tell. So it is based on theory and like evidence, you know what I mean? As opposed to being like a immutable fact. As opposed to being like a fact. But at the same time, there's evidence for it. And truthfully, there weren't all these trans kids forever that were just fucking offing themselves at incredible rates, and then surgery came along or puberty blockers came along and saved their lives. That really isn't how it's gone down. There's no evidence for that at all. Can you hear that? Whenever people throw bottles away, they have to do it as loud as possible for some reason. Why is there never any stats on effective cognitive therapy on kids with gender dysphoria? My guess is because WPATH says that that's not the way to go. And they're the ones that tell most countries what to do. My other guess is that's part of the concerted effort to make out that any other kind of therapy is conversion therapy. So, hey. And honestly, as much as I don't like conversion therapy, like when it's actually conversion therapy, it makes me wonder if like the proposed bans that we get in this country are even a good idea. Because it seems like the potential for overreach is quite a lot.
However, the size of this cohort pales in comparison to the size of the adolescent onset cohort, about whom we know far, far less. From my observation, teenagers with adolescent onset gender dysphoria who are denied access to a gender clinic rarely age out of their distress before it takes a life-shattering toll on their psyches and bodies. Their gender journey becomes their rebellious path.
Like the only mental illness where therapy isn't the first step. Well, therapy is the first step, but it's a specific kind of therapy by gender therapists. It's a specific it's a specific model that doesn't really match any other form of treatment, really, because most of the time you don't lean into the delusion, you don't affirm the delusion. The trans is like unique in that respect. And maybe delusion is a hard word to use, a harsh word to use, should I say, but I don't know. What am I supposed to call it?
To individuation from their parents, while simultaneously taking up so much brain space that it stunts their development. This renders even the most stable and clear-headed adolescent unable to plan their future beyond transition. They are so childish in their thinking, and yet so close to legal adulthood, that they become no more capable of envisioning a life as a healthy, non-conforming member of their sex by the time they are allowed to make their own medical decisions. Time alone does not make these teens more capable of giving consent. It only makes them more desperate. This reality must.
DBT, group therapy with integrative approach. Hey, maybe, yeah, the thing is, there's been a concerted effort to push trans healthcare down a very specific path. So, yeah, I don't know, man, it sucks.
Be accounted for, not only in the United States, but in every country attempting to disentangle its youth from the clutches of gender ideology. As countries like the UK begin to open detrans health clinics, doctors who wish to help patients heal from gender-affirming care.
Wait, I've never heard of that. Is that true? We're opening detransition clinics? Six new specialist centers for children and young people. Tailored gender services based on the cast review. It might be in here then. Because there is nothing really for like detransitioners, as far as I know. It seems like often the surgeons just tell you to go fuck yourself. And like there's only like gender identity clinics. They don't really know how to deal with like people desisting and detransitioning. Did they mention it? I'm not sure. You know what's funny though? Like, people complain that the cast review is this fucking terrible. They're providing more services for people with gender issues. Like, isn't that what you'll want? Jesus Christ. I'm not seeing any of this. Like, maybe it's in here somewhere. I could be being a bit stupid. Help for detransitioners. I know. Listen, is this true or not? I'm not sure. Can't verify.
As health clinics. Doctors who wish to help patients heal from gender-affirming care must understand the ways in which every transition-related intervention causes individual harms, which only become further complicated by each subsequent intervention, regardless of whether the intervention was bought online and endorsed by medical professionals, whether it was picked up from a pharmacy or performed on an operating table. Assuming that bans across Europe and Trump's executive orders stick, despite legal challenges, we must contend with the fact that we have not solved the problem. We have only addressed a fraction of it. Many of these kids who play around with gender identities won't medicalize immediately or ever. What they are far more likely to do is to go down the path I took and still sustain irreversible psychological and bodily damage. Banning medical transition for minors is a good first step towards sanity, but it does not prevent indoctrinated children from being irreversibly harmed. It only delays the young age at which they can legally and medically escalate the harms they have already sustained into something way worse. We must remember that every bloody scar started out as an invisible one that was not caught in time. If we want to prevent more bloodshed, we must recognize the harm at its source. We mustn't become complacent now that doctors are forced to wait a few more years.
Bloodshed is a strong term, I gotta say.
Before cutting into healthy young people. The fact that young people can do so much damage to themselves based on an idea and with the assistance of compression garments alone should show us just how dangerous this ideology is. The fact that even the lowest tech gender transition interventions can permanently alter the life trajectory of a young person should enrage us. The fact that it only takes one click on the internet to permanently derail a young person's life should infuriate us. Until we make binding, tucking, and social transition culture war issues, we will forever be struggling to maintain our progress. These distressed young people who have been waiting years to eat from the tree of forbidden gender fruit will have had years to marinate in this destructive ideology. The day they reach legal adulthood, they will enter the gender clinic, and they will become lobbyists for the necessity of body part removal as a cure to the distress they've been incubating in their minds. And
I mean, she's making a good point here in terms of like people are getting more and more radicalized. That's going to keep happening. You cut off access to medicalization. It's going to probably push that more in some people. The hope is it will at least kind of ward some people off who start realizing that this wasn't right for them in the first place anyway. I don't know, like parents need to be concerned with like who their kids are talking to on the internet, quite frankly.
Bodies throughout their adolescence. Then we will be right back to where we started. Without proper psychological intervention and political de-radicalization, our hard-fought progress will become a distant memory as this scourge continues to consume our youth. Our fight to end gender ideology has not ended. It has only just begun. Thank you for listening to my essay. I will link it below, along with other platforms you can find me on. Until next time.
I found that interesting. I'm supposed to not like this person, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I agree with a lot of what she's saying, quite honestly. Like I said, like on Twitter, this person's kind of crazy, but so are a lot of people. And I guess I kind of get it, but yeah, we're saying desister, detrans. So are we not kind of being honest either way? Like there are definitely like accusations of like stolen valor in this person, but I don't know. Like if you fucked up your health by binding, then you've been hurt by this shit regardless. You know what I mean? And I think she made sense. Yeah, this is the thing. Like, I don't like being told what to think, I guess. There's going to be people that shit on these kinds of people. I don't really know where they're coming from sometimes. And I'd like to understand where people are coming from. They don't like specific people, but often you don't really get much of an explanation. So it's like, what am I supposed to Am I supposed to just believe people that someone or other is bad and shouldn't be listened to? Well, what if they're saying correct things on something? I don't know. If I load up a fucking Monty video and she's actually speaking fucking sense, then I'll take it, you know. I don't like this person or what they stand for, but at the same time, you know. Oh, hi, Clara. I hope you're good. But yeah, I mean, the grifter accusations, should I say, are gonna get thrown at anyone, and this is someone that's got like these speaking gigs and stuff on the back of this. But the thing is, when something bad has happened to someone, it's kind of understandable why they would then end up this way. And a lot of the crazy radicalization, like both ways, is a huge problem, quite frankly. Yeah, this was the video I watched. This will be a picture of them when they were younger, I guess. It's not good. I mean, I'm not down with like this kind of thing, quite honestly. Yeah, there we go, Maya Poet. I found that interesting.